ever get that heart-stopping feeling?
Yeah.
When you see one of those official envelopes in the mail?
Oh, tell me about it. Like your brain just goes straight to, uh-oh, what now?
Exactly. And I feel like debt collection lawsuits, those can definitely trigger that like fight or flight response.
For sure.
And they're more common in Ontario than people think. So today, we are diving deep into all this legal stuff.
Yeah.
Using your research to help people navigate this, like a pro.
Yeah.
Hopefully no more deer in the headlights feeling, right?
Yeah, you're definitely right about how common it is. Over 500,000 Canadians a year get hit with these lawsuits.
Wow.
It's a staggering number. And so many people, they just feel so ambushed, right? Like it came out of nowhere. And that's where really understanding the actual laws in Ontario can be, it can be a lifesaver.
Okay, so let's break it down then. What actually are the rules of the game when it comes to debt collection in Ontario?
So here in Ontario, we have very specific legislation in place that dictates how collection agencies can even operate.
Okay.
Two of the most important ones are the Collection and Debt Settlement Services Act and the Consumer Reporting Act.
Okay, so those are the big ones. But like for someone who's never even opened a law book, what do those acts actually do? How do they actually protect people?
Well, they set those legal boundaries. For instance, the Collection and Debt Settlement Services Act.
Yeah.
That one prohibits those collectors from using deceptive or harassing tactics to get you to pay up.
Okay.
They can't, for example, threaten you with jail time.
Right.
Or call you at all hours of the night.
Right. So it's not like they can show up at your door with a boombox blasting money, money, money at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Okay, good to know. There are actual consequences if they break these rules, though, right?
Yes, thankfully there are. Breaking these laws can lead to some pretty hefty fines. In some cases, they could even lose their license. But, and this is what I find really concerning, despite how common these lawsuits are and despite these protections, a surprising number of people choose to just face them alone.
Wait, really? That's kind of wild. Why wouldn't you get help with something as, potentially serious as a lawsuit?
Yeah, it's pretty surprising. It's estimated that only about 1/3 of people facing these lawsuits actually talk to a legal professional.
Wow.
And there are lots of reasons for it, but it often comes down to a lack of awareness, or even fear and shame around debt.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just legal hurdles here. There's this whole other emotional and psychological side to it, which I definitely want to get into a bit later.
Sure.
But before we do, let's talk about what people can actually do to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially with this. It really is. One of the most important things you can do is, arm yourself with the knowledge to avoid some common mistakes. And these aren't little slip-ups. They can be major pitfalls.
Okay, pitfalls. Let's talk about those. What's the first one people should watch out for?
The first one, and it's so easy to fall into this trap, is delaying your response to the lawsuit.
So just kind of tossing that letter in a drawer and hoping it magically disappears.
Yeah. Exactly. And look, it's totally understandable. Who wants to deal with something stressful, right? But ignoring that statement of claim, which, by the way, that's the official document telling you you're being sued, it doesn't make it go away. It actually makes it way worse.
So no more ostrich with its head in the sand approach.
Got it.
But legally speaking, what happens if you miss that deadline to respond?
That's when the court can issue what's called a default judgment.
Default judgment. Okay, that sounds kind of intimidating. What does that even mean for someone?
It basically means the court just sides with the creditor automatically because you didn't respond in time. Imagine missing a court date. The case just goes on without you. And the consequences, those can be pretty serious.
Okay, so we're not talking just a slap on the wrist here. What kind of consequences are we talking about?
Well, when they get that default judgment, the creditors, they have a lot more power. They can go after what's called a wage garnishment, meaning they can take money straight from your paycheck before you even see it.
Ooh, okay, yeah. I see why avoiding that default judgment is pretty crucial.
Yeah.
So responding quickly, that's key. But what about the debt itself? Is it ever a good idea to just admit, yep, I owe this?
That brings us to pitfall number 2, prematurely admitting to the debt.
Okay.
It's easy to think, well, I do owe the money, so what's the big deal?
Yeah.
But it's not always that cut and dry.
So it's not just about whether you owe it or not. There's more to it.
There can be. You got to be 100% sure about that amount they're claiming. And even if they have the right to sue you in the first place, there could be errors, issues with something called the statute of limitations. That's how long they have to actually take you to court. It gets complicated.
So it's like accidentally confessing to a crime you didn't commit. You got to make sure all the facts line up.
Exactly. And this is where having a legal expert on your side is, well, it's invaluable. They can actually go through your case, see if anything seems off, and help you build a strong defense.
Right. Because even if you do intend to pay back a debt, you don't want to end up paying more than you actually owe, right? Or to the wrong people even. So what's the third big mistake people tend to make when facing one of these lawsuits?
The third one, and it's tempting in this day and age, is trying to represent yourself in court.
Oh, yeah. The old, I'll just handle this myself approach.
Yeah.
But law seems like one of those things you really don't want to be winging.
You are right about that. And look, there's tons of legal info online, but actually navigating a lawsuit, especially with all the financial stuff, that is not for the faint of heart. It's like, Imagine trying to do surgery on yourself after watching YouTube videos. The stakes are just way too high.
Yeah, no kidding. This isn't like baking a cake where you can just toss it out if it doesn't turn out right.
Exactly.
The consequences of messing up your legal defense, those can last a long time.
Right.
But okay, we've talked about responding right away, not admitting to the debt too soon, and not, going the DIY legal route.
Right.
But there's this whole other layer to this debt collection thing we haven't really gotten into yet.
Yeah.
It's like the emotional and mental toll it takes, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that emotional part, it's often forgotten. Because this isn't just about numbers on a page, right? Yeah. It's people's lives.
Yeah.
Their well-being. A debt collection lawsuit, honestly, it can be incredibly stressful.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the sleepless nights, the constant worry.
Yeah.
What are some other ways this whole thing impacts someone's mental health?
Well, there's so much shame that comes with debt, right? It's almost like a stigma. And people, they start to isolate themselves, afraid of being judged or burdening loved ones.
Right.
And that just makes the stress even worse. It can make people feel totally hopeless. I've even had clients who, they were so overwhelmed with that shame that they were too embarrassed to even ask for legal help.
Wow.
Even though that was the best thing for them.
It's like this awful cycle: stress, shame, isolation. Sounds hard to break free from that. What would you say to someone stuck in that cycle right now? What's the first step to taking back control?
First off, I want to say asking for help. That is not weak. If anything, it's strong. If you are dealing with one of these lawsuits, you are not alone. There are people who get it, who understand, and who can help you through it.
So where do you even begin? Who do you reach out to?
The most important thing is to talk to a lawyer. One who specializes in this stuff, in debt management. They can look at your situation, tell you what your options are, and, guide you toward the best path.
So it's about getting advice that's actually tailored to you. Makes sense. But what about those other options you mentioned before, like consumer proposals, bankruptcy, that kind of thing? When are those worth looking into?
Yeah, those are definitely things to discuss with your lawyer. They can be a really good way to manage debt that feels overwhelming. With a consumer proposal, for example, you actually negotiate with your creditors to repay just a portion of what you owe.
Okay.
And it's all done within a specific time frame. It's a legally binding agreement. So it can offer real relief and help you get that fresh start.
So it's not always about wiping out the debt overnight. It's more about finding a way to actually manage it.
Exactly.
Sounds like taking that first step, talking to a lawyer, that can open up options you might not even know about.
Absolutely. I always say knowledge is power. A good lawyer will give you the power to make smart choices about your money. They can cut through all that legal jargon, negotiate on your behalf, and make sure you're aware of every option.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I think the big takeaway is that getting hit with a debt collection lawsuit, it can feel overwhelming. But you are not alone. There is hope. And taking action, starting by talking to an expert, that is key to getting through this and coming out on top.